My name is Clara Ann Merritt. I am 28 years old. On November 26th, 2024, my mother called me at 6:42 inches the evening and told me to come home for Thanksgiving. Her voice was warm in that particular way it got when she needed something soft around the edges, careful, like she was handling something fragile. "The whole family," she said. "All of us together. It's been too long, sweetheart." I drove 41 miles from my apartment in Murfreesboro to my parents' house in Franklin, Tennessee. The house is worth $1.8 million according to Zillow. I checked once on a Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep, and found myself wondering what it would feel like to be considered part of what that house represented. I took I-24 west, and then 96 north. Windows down even though it was 43 degrees because I needed the cold air to settle the hope that was already building in my chest. Hope is a dangerous thing when your family has spent years giving you reasons to stop feeling it. I pulled into the driveway at 8:17 p.m. One car was there, a 2002 Buick LeSabre, champagne-colored, with a dent on the rear bumper from a parking lot in 2019 that my grandmother had never gotten fixed because, she said, it gave the car character. My parents' Volvo was gone. My brother's Audi was gone. I sat in my car for a moment with the engine running, and the heat finally coming through the vents, and I counted my breaths. Then I went inside. The front door was unlocked. The foyer smelled like cinnamon and old books and the specific dusty warmth of a house that has been lived in for decades. The kitchen light was on. I walked through to the living room and found my grandmother sitting at the dining table in her house, robe and slippers, working a crossword puzzle in ink. She looked up when I came in. Her face showed no surprise at all. "They're not here," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," she said. "Sit down, Clara." On the kitchen counter was a note in my mother's handwriting. She has the kind of handwriting they don't teach anymore. Every letter perfectly formed, disciplined and beautiful and cold. I read it standing up. "Clara, I'm so sorry for the last-minute change. Marcus got the regional director promotion, the big one, remember? His firm is flying the whole team to New York for the announcement dinner. Dad and I couldn't miss it, you understand. Grandma Evelyn is here. She needs her blood pressure medication at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's on the counter. Stay through Sunday if you can. There are leftovers in the fridge. We'll celebrate Thanksgiving properly when we're back. P.S. I know teaching doesn't pay much, but maybe helping with Grandma will remind you that taking care of people has real value." I read it twice. The words "taking care of people has real value" sat in my chest like a stone, because what she meant, what she always meant, was that it just didn't have monetary value. Not the kind that mattered to her. Not the kind my brother had. I folded the note and put it in the pocket of my jacket. I don't know exactly why I kept it. I have a habit of keeping things I should probably throw away. My grandmother watched me from the table. She was 79 years old and had been watching my family for a long time. "You knew they weren't going to be here," I said. She picked up her pen and filled in another square. "I suspected." I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. The table was old oak, the same one she'd had in her house before she moved in with my parents 3 years ago, when her knees started giving her trouble. It had hosted 40 years of Sunday dinners and holiday meals and quiet mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. "Grandma," I said, "are you okay?" She set down her pen and looked at me. Her eyes were sharp and brown and entirely clear. My grandmother has never once in her life looked like a woman who needed to be worried about. "I'm fine," she said. "The question is whether you are." I didn't have an answer for that. So I went to check her medications. 2 bottles on the counter. Lisinopril, 10 milligrams, once in the morning. Atorvastatin, 20 milligrams, once at night. Both current, both filled last week. I checked the dates, the prescribing physician, the dosages. I'm an elementary school teacher, not a nurse, but I've been the one managing my grandmother's medications for 3 years because my parents were always in the middle of something that mattered more. I set alarms on my phone. 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. I opened the refrigerator. 3 containers of leftover Chinese takeout, none of it labeled. A half-empty bottle of white wine. 2 apples. An expired carton of orange juice. This was the Thanksgiving my mother had arranged for her own mother. I ordered groceries on Instacart. $73. I made my grandmother scrambled eggs and toast, and we sat together at the old oak table and ate in a quiet that felt more honest than any family dinner I could remember. She told me later that my parents had called her that morning. My mother's voice had been cheerful. "Evelyn, Clara's coming to stay with you through Sunday. She'll handle everything. You'll be fine." Then, she'd hung up. The call lasted 45 seconds. I know because my grandmother showed me her phone, a Samsung that my brother had bought her 2 Christmases ago because it was on sale. Incoming call. Diane Merritt. November 26th, 9:03 a.m. Duration, 0:45. They hadn't told me they weren't coming until I was already in my car. The next morning, I woke at 7 to find my grandmother already up and dressed in slacks and a cardigan, standing at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard. The garden was November brown, everything dormant and gray-looking. She had put on a pot of coffee in an old percolator that my grandfather had bought in 1988. It still worked perfectly. "Your grandfather bought that the year Marcus was born," she said, handing me a cup. "I've had people tell me to throw it away and get a nice Keurig. I tell them if it isn't broken, there's no reason to replace it." We sat on the back porch with our coffee, even though it was 41 degrees. She had a wool blanket over her lap. I had my jacket zipped to the chin. "Clara," she said, "do you know anything about Merritt's Bakery?" Of course I did. My grandmother had opened Merritt's Bakery in Cookeville, Tennessee, in 1971 with my grandfather. She'd run it for 34 years. It was the kind of place people drove 40 minutes to get to on Saturday mornings. When my grandfather died in 2003, she'd run it alone for 2 more years. And then in 2005, a regional hospitality group had made her an offer. "You sold it," I said. "When I was 9. I sold it for $4.2 million, she said. Calm, factual, like she was reading the temperature off a thermometer. I held my coffee cup with both hands. "Does Dad know that number?" "Your father believes I sold it for somewhere around 400,000. He's never asked the exact amount. He assumed a small-town bakery." She paused. I let him assume. "Grandma, I wanted to see," she said simply. "Who would love me when they thought I had nothing worth having?" She stood up, said she was going inside to get warmer, and left me sitting on the back porch with that sentence hanging in the cold air. I found the attorney's card 3 days later. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a pen in the drawer of the side table in the living room, the one she kept her crossword books and reading glasses, and the small accumulated debris of daily life. The card was tucked under a crossword book, cream-colored cardstock, clean black lettering. Patricia Holloway, Estate Planning and Trust Administration, Nashville, Tennessee. On the back, in my grandmother's precise handwriting, December 19th, 2 p.m., confirmed Tuesday. Today was November 29th. December 19th was 3 weeks away. I put the card back exactly where I found it, and didn't say anything. That evening she asked me to sit with her in the living room after dinner. She had been talking more than usual about my grandfather, about the bakery, about the early years when they had nothing and built something from nothing. Stories I had heard fragments of, but never in full. I sat on the floor with my back against the sofa and listened to all of them. She told me about my father, how he had been a good boy who became a practical man who valued things that could be measured. She said this without bitterness, just observation. She told me about my brother Marcus, how she had noticed, starting when he was 12 or 13, that he paid attention to what things cost before he paid attention to what they were. She said she had watched this for a long time. "And you?" I asked. She looked at me for a moment. "You brought me flowers once," she said. "For no reason. You were 7. You picked them from the field behind your parents' house, the purple ones, whatever they're called. You brought them in a paper cup with water in the bottom so they wouldn't die on the way over. You had thought about it." I remembered that. I hadn't thought about it in years. "That's not a reason to change a will," I said carefully. "No," she agreed. "But 30 years of watching is." My brother texted on the 1st of December. "Hey sis. Hope you and Grams are hanging in. Mom says you're taking good care of her. We appreciate it." His we meant himself and my parents, not my grandmother, who was sitting 4 feet away from me and fully capable of speaking for herself. I showed her the text, she read it, and handed the phone back without expression. "He appreciates it," she said. "The way you appreciate a service you didn't have to pay for." I had been the one taking care of her for 3 years. When her knees got bad and my parents decided she should move in with them, it was me who drove to Cookville and packed her things and loaded the truck. It was me who took her to her cardiology appointments and her follow-up with the orthopedist and her annual eye exam. My parents came to one appointment in 3 years, and that was because the cardiologist asked them specifically to be there, and even then my father had left early for a conference call. Marcus had visited 7 times. I had counted once without meaning to. He always arrived with a bottle of wine and left within 2 hours and hugged her goodbye in the way you hug someone you are glad to be finished seeing. My parents came home December 4th. My mother hugged me at the door and said I looked tired and asked if I wanted her to make up the guest room so I could stay another night and rest. I said I was fine and drove home to Murfreesboro, 41 miles back east, with the note still folded in my jacket pocket. I did not hear from them for 11 days. The text came December 15th, 9:22 a.m. My mother's number. Sweetheart, I know this is a lot to ask, but could you come back and stay with Grandma through the holidays? We're going to be in New York again for Marcus's actual awards ceremony. It's a big deal. The regional directors from the whole Southeast will be there. We'll be back the 26th. I know Christmas is a lot to give up, but you know how Grandma loves having you there. She always says you're her favorite. XOXO. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I texted back. I'll be there the 20th. My boyfriend Daniel called that night. We had been together for 2 years, and he knew my family the way you know a weather pattern, not because you enjoy it, but because you've been watching it long enough to predict it. He was quiet for a moment after I told him. They're doing it again, he said. I know. Clara, you know I had something planned for Christmas Eve. I did know. I had seen the ring box. I had not seen it on purpose. I had been looking for a phone charger in his nightstand drawer 3 weeks ago, and there it was, small and navy blue, tucked behind a phone charger that hadn't moved in 6 months. I had closed the drawer and not said anything. It'll still be Christmas Eve when I get back, I said. That's not the point. I know it's not the point. The point is they keep doing this, and you keep letting them. He wasn't wrong. He was exactly right, the way he always was. I had spent 28 years waiting for my family to treat me like I was worth showing up for, and every time they proved they wouldn't, I found a way to explain it, smooth it over, file it away. She's my grandmother, I said. Not them, her. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said finally. But Clara, at some point, you have to stop letting what they want come before what you need. I drove back to Franklin on December 20th. My grandmother was waiting for me in the living room when I arrived, dressed in her good slacks and the blue cardigan I had given her 2 Christmases ago. She had made coffee. There was a plate of sugar cookies on the kitchen counter, the kind from the grocery store bakery, not homemade, because her hands had gotten too stiff for rolling dough. She poured me a cup before I had even taken off my coat. They're in New York, I said. Yes, she said. I know. We fell into the same rhythm as Thanksgiving. Mornings with coffee on the back porch wrapped in blankets. Her garden was fully dormant now. Nothing left but bare branches and the brown remains of last summer's tomatoes. She talked about my grandfather, about the bakery, about Cookville in the 1970s when the town was smaller and everybody knew you by name. On December 22nd, she asked me to drive her somewhere. She directed me to a building on West End Avenue in Nashville, a quiet office building with brass fixtures on the door. She went inside alone and came out 26 minutes later, carrying a manila envelope secured with a metal clasp. She put it in her purse without opening it, got back in my car, and said, "Home, please." On the way back, she said, "Patricia will come to the house on the 26th. Your parents will be home by then." "The attorney," I said. She looked at me. "You found the card." "I wasn't looking for it." "I know you weren't." She looked out the window at the gray Nashville sky. "I need you there. It concerns you." I kept my eyes on the road. "How?" She didn't answer. Then she said, "I've been watching your family for a very long time. I've been watching how they treat you. I've been watching what they think you're worth." She paused. "I want you to know what I think you're worth." I didn't say anything because my throat was too tight to speak. Christmas morning, there were no presents from my parents. I already knew there wouldn't be. They'd promised to bring something from New York, which was the same promise they made every year they were somewhere else, and thought a purchase could substitute for presents. My grandmother gave me an envelope. Inside, a handmade card. She had drawn a bakery storefront in colored pencil. Shaky but recognizable, the green awning of Merritt's, the hand-painted sign in the window. Inside she had written, "Clara, you have always shown up. Not because someone asked you to, but because you knew someone needed you. That is rarer than anything money can buy. All my love, Grandma Evelyn." Tucked inside was a check for $500. The check was dated 1993. She had kept it blank for 31 years. "I've been saving it for someone worth giving it to," she said. "I just had to find the right person." I cried for several minutes in the kitchen while she pretended to look for something in the refrigerator. Daniel called in the evening. His voice was warm and careful in equal measure. "Merry Christmas, babe." "Merry Christmas. How's your grandmother?" "Good," I said. She's really good, actually." Through the doorway I could see her in the living room, her reading lamp on, working her crossword puzzle in the quiet. Her face in the lamplight was peaceful and sharp and completely herself. "Something's happening," I told him. "I don't know the full shape of it yet, but I think it's going to be okay." "You've always been okay, Clara," he said. "You just have a family that made you forget it." My parents arrived home December 26th at 2:49 p.m. I heard the garage door, then the sounds of luggage, then my mother's voice carrying into the house with the automatic brightness it had after trips. She was good at arrivals, always had been. She knew how to enter a room. Patricia Holloway was already seated in the living room. She had arrived at 2 o'clock exactly, set her briefcase on the coffee table, and accepted a cup of coffee from my grandmother with a composure that suggested she had sat in a lot of living rooms over the course of her career and had seen most of what there was to see. My grandmother sat in her wingback chair, the one with the worn armrests. I sat on the sofa. Patricia sat across from us. The garage door opened. My mother's voice first. "Mom, we're home." Then my father's heavier footsteps. Then Marcus's voice, already moving faster, already analyzing the unfamiliar car in the driveway. They came in. My mother first, in a coat I hadn't seen before, her smile already adjusted and automatic. Then my father. Then Marcus, who saw Patricia and her briefcase before he had fully entered the room, and whose expression shifted in approximately 2 seconds, from relaxed to calculating. "Mom," my father said slowly, "who is this?" My grandmother looked at him with the same expression she wore while doing a crossword puzzle. "Certain. This is Patricia Holloway," she said. "My attorney. Sit down, Richard." My mother laughed. The sound was slightly too quick. "Evelyn, you're making us nervous. Is everything all right? Are you sick?" "I'm not sick. Sit down, Diane." They sat. My parents took the love seat. Marcus dragged a chair from the dining room, and I watched him position it slightly apart from everyone else, the way he always did when he was assessing a situation he hadn't been briefed on. Patricia opened her briefcase. She removed a document I counted the pages later. 39. My name appeared on the first page. "Mrs. Merritt," Patricia said, "has asked me to explain certain changes to her estate plan. These changes were executed on December 22nd, 2024, and are legally binding." She adjusted the document on her lap. Total estate assets: $14,722,000. The number sat in the room like a physical object. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father went very still. Marcus's knees started moving, one short controlled bounce, a tell I had noticed years ago and he had never quite been able to stop. "That's my father started." "Mom," I thought. "You thought I sold the bakery for less than that," my grandmother said. "You never asked the exact number. You assumed." "The distribution is as follows," Patricia continued. "To Richard Allen Merritt, $250,000. To Diane Carroll Merritt, $250,000. To Marcus James Merritt, $250,000. She paused exactly long enough. To the Cookeville Community College Culinary Arts Fund, $1 million. To Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee, $500,000. To Clara Ann Merritt, $472,000, plus sole discretionary authority over any additional distributions to family members. The silence that followed had a texture to it. Marcus broke it first. He was a financial advisor. He understood numbers faster than the rest of us. 12 million. His voice was flat. That's correct, Patricia said. Clara. My mother turned to me, and her face had a look I had never seen on it before. Something past surprise and into something rawer. Did you know about this? I found out on the 22nd, I said. Did you ask her to? No. I kept my voice even. Nobody asked me anything, Mom. I just showed up, the way I always do. My father stood up. He was the kind of man who managed difficult conversations by moving, by creating the physical impression of control. Evelyn, there are things to consider here. Legal things. Clara is not equipped to manage an estate of this size. She's a schoolteacher. She's also the only person in this room, my grandmother said, who has taken me to a doctor's appointment in the past 3 years. My father sat back down. Marcus leaned forward. His voice had gone smooth and professional, negotiator mode. Grandma, I understand what you're trying to do, and I think it comes from a good place. But let's talk about this privately, without the attorney. No, my grandmother said. If I talked to you privately, you would spend 40 minutes explaining to me why my own feelings about my own money were incorrect. Patricia stays. Marcus blinked. Then he turned to me. You coached her on this. I didn't know the details until 4 days ago. You've been here for a week building a case. Marcus. My grandmother's voice was quiet and completely final. He stopped talking. She looked at Patricia and nodded once. Patricia reached into the folder and removed an envelope. Cream paper, the kind my grandmother used for important correspondence. She had written the names on the front in her careful hand. Richard, Diane, Marcus, Mrs. Merritt has written a letter, Patricia said, which she has asked me to read aloud. That's not necessary, Marcus said. Your grandmother believes it is, Patricia said, and opened the envelope. She read it without inflection, which somehow made it worse. Richard, Diane, Marcus. I am 79 years old. Your grandfather built Merritt's bakery with me for 34 years. When he died, I ran it alone. When I sold it in 2005, I received $4,200,000. I have invested it conservatively for 19 years. It has grown to nearly $15 million. None of you ever asked what I sold it for. You assumed a small number because you assumed I was a small person, a woman with a small business in a small town who needed to be managed and cared for and not consulted. I want to be very clear about what I have watched over the past 30 years. Marcus, I have watched you visit me 7 times in 3 years. Each time you brought wine and left within 2 hours. You have not once asked about my garden, my health, my sleep, my friends, or anything that was not eventually connected to what you might inherit. Richard and Diane, I have watched you use Clara as a convenience. When you needed to be somewhere that mattered more to you, Clara became the solution to the problem I represented. You called her a day in advance for Thanksgiving. You texted her on Christmas Eve to arrange Christmas. You left her a note, not a phone call. A note telling her that teaching does not pay much but caring for people has real value. As if the value of caring for people should be measured in its cost-effectiveness to those who benefit from it. Do you know what Clara has done in 3 years? She has taken me to 14 medical appointments. She drove to Cookville and packed 31 years of my life into a moving truck. She has called me every Sunday at 6 o'clock. Not because I asked her to, but because she thought about it and decided that was something worth doing. When I had pneumonia in February, she slept in my room for 3 nights on a cot she brought from her apartment. She told no one. She did not do it for credit. She did it because it needed to be done, and she was the one who would do it. None of you knew about the pneumonia. Clara came to me this Thanksgiving and Christmas not because she wanted to, or because she had nothing better to do, or because she had been carefully positioning herself to influence a dying woman. She came because I was alone, and she is the kind of person who cannot walk past someone who is alone without stopping. That is not weakness. That is the rarest kind of character. You will each receive $250,000. This is more than fair. If you want to know whether there is more, you will have to ask Clara. She will decide at her sole discretion, and she will not be rushed, pressured, or guilt-tripped, because she has finally been given the standing to make those decisions for herself. This is not punishment. This is a correction. I love all of you, but love does not require me to pretend I haven't seen what I've seen. Evelyn Ruth Merritt. December 21st, 2024. Patricia folded the letter and set it on the table. My mother was crying. Not the quick, managed tears she used in difficult conversations, but the kind that came from somewhere past the performance of emotion. My father's face had gone the color of old concrete. Marcus was staring at the carpet. Then Marcus looked at me. Something had shifted in his expression, the smoothness gone, and underneath it something that looked, for just a moment, like a person who had understood something about himself. He didn't say anything. He stood up, got his coat from the foyer hook where he had hung it 40 minutes ago, and walked out the front door. His car started a moment later. My father put his face in his hands. My mother looked at me. Her mascara had run, and she hadn't fixed it, which felt significant. "Clara," she said. Her voice was rough. "I know that I haven't. I know things could have been different." She stopped. Started again. "Is there anything I can do?" I thought about all the things she could have done. I thought about the texts I had sent from hospital parking lots, and the calls that had gone to voicemail, and the Thanksgiving I had spent driving 41 miles in both directions because she needed me to. I thought about the note in my jacket pocket. "I'll let you know," I said. Patricia packed her briefcase. On her way out, she shook my hand and said, simply, "Your grandmother has been planning this for a very long time. She wanted to be sure she was seeing clearly before she acted." She looked at me. She was certain. The door closed. My parents remained on the love seat. My grandmother remained in her wingback chair. I stood in the middle of the room and felt the strange lightness of something heavy finally being set down. The messages started that evening. "Marcus, Clara, we need to talk about this." My mother, 9:47 p.m. "Please call me. Whatever you need, we can work it out." My father, the next morning. "Sweetheart, I want to understand what you need from us. We can have a real conversation about this." Marcus again, December 28th. "I've spoken to an estate attorney. The question of undue influence in situations like this is well established. I want to resolve this without legal action, but I need you to know that's an option." I forwarded that one to Patricia. Her response came in 20 minutes. "Noted. This is a protected communication now. Do not respond. He has no case. BP." I didn't respond. Daniel drove up December 27th. He sat with me and my grandmother at the old oak table, and she made us all coffee in the 1988 percolator, and the three of us talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. At one point, my grandmother got up to refill her cup, and Daniel looked at me across the table and said quietly, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I really am." That surprised me when I said it. But it was true. My grandmother died on February 11th. It was not unexpected. Her cardiologist had told us in January that her heart was declining and that we should think about comfort measures. I was with her. I sat with her in the same wingback chair, her hand in both of mine, and I talked to her about the bakery and my grandfather and the green awning and the Saturday mornings when the line was out the door. I don't know if she could hear me. I talked anyway. My father came to the house. He sat in the living room alone for a while, and then came and stood in the doorway of the bedroom and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Clara, for a lot of things." He didn't ask about the money. He just said it. I looked at him. I said, "I know." That was all. But it was something. 6 months later, my parents completed a family therapy intake, 12 sessions, per the conditions I set. My mother wrote me a letter 7 pages, handwritten, on the same cream paper my grandmother had used. I've read it 4 times. I'm not ready to write back yet, but I will be. My father has gone back 5 times, which is 4 more times than anyone asked him to. Marcus called me in March. He didn't ask about the money. He asked how I was doing and whether I had planted anything in my grandmother's garden. I told him I had put in tomatoes, a different variety than she grew, something new, but in the same raised beds. He said that sounded good. We talked for 12 minutes. It was the longest real conversation we had ever had. I donated $2 million to the Cookeville Community College culinary program in my grandmother's name. The rest I invested, conservatively, in a balanced portfolio. I still teach 3rd grade at Jackson Elementary. I love it. I just own my car now and my apartment, and a small house with a garden where things are beginning to grow. Daniel proposed in April. We were on the hiking trail at Radnor Lake, late afternoon, the light coming through the trees in long flat bars. He had planned it for months. I said yes before he finished the question. The money didn't change what I understood about myself. I had known for a long time what I was worth. I had just spent 28 years in a family that kept asking me to forget it. My name is Clara Ann Merritt. I am 28 years old. I am a 3rd grade teacher. And I am, finally and without apology, exactly enough.